Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. It has been a long time since I have put a Meals of the Week video out, and I am getting to finally put one out for you guys. So to get started, we are going to make one of my favorite meals, and I don't really make this a lot because Steven says he's kind of sick of it because I used to make it a lot because it's one of my favorites. It is a sloppy joe. Now this recipe really reminds me of kind of how I remember having it when I was a kid. It's very, very similar to the canned manwich, at least I think so. So to get started, what you're going to do is take a little bit of butter and a little bit of olive oil and just add 1 pound of meat to the skillet. So in this particular situation, I'm using a pound of ground beef, but you can definitely use any type of ground meat that you would like in this. Next up, the recipe suggests to use 1/3 green bell pepper minced. I don't have any fresh pepper right now, but I do have a whole bunch in my freezer, and I actually need to get this used because it is now garden season and we will have fresh peppers soon enough. So happy to get this frozen stuff used up to make room for this year's garden stuff. If you would like, you can also take half of a yellow onion and just mince that up and then add that with your bell pepper. So once your meat is all cooked through, you just want to drain it a little bit. This meat is kind of more higher fat content, so I did have a little leftover beef fat in there. So I actually left a lot of those beef drippings in there and just added a little bit of butter, and now I'm going to saute my pepper in that fat drippings. If you are adding onion, you're going to also add it in at this point. Now what you want to do is just saute that for about 2 to 3 minutes until the onion and the pepper is nice and soft. Next up, you're going to add 3 cloves of garlic to this, and then saute that for about 30 seconds until the garlic is fragrant, and then you're going to add your meat back in. Now because I did not add onion to this, I'm just going to come in and add some onion powder just so that I get that onion flavor without the onion texture. And then you're just going to cook that through. Next up, what you want to do is add 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. Now I freeze my tomato paste because I can never use a full jar in one meal, so I just take the excess and then just freeze it. So that's why you see me taking it out of the Ziploc baggie. It's just frozen, so I'm just going to stir it until it gets completely melted through. Next up, you're going to come in and add 2/3 cup of ketchup to that and 1/3 cup of water. I just added the water to the ketchup thing just so that I could get all of the ketchup out of my measuring cup. So you're going to stir that until that is good and combined, and then you're going to come in and add 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. I like to pack my brown sugar into my tablespoon, and then 1 teaspoon of yellow mustard, 3/4 teaspoon of chili powder, and then half a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. I definitely just eyeball it because I like to add way more than half a teaspoon. I probably added maybe about 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire. And then you're just gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper, and then red pepper flakes if you like a little heat. So about 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes and about half a teaspoon of salt. You wanna get that stirred until it is well combined. Next up, you are gonna make sure that your heat is on medium heat, and you are gonna cover it and cook it for about 10 to 15 minutes until that mixture has thickened up to your liking. I had made fresh buns that morning, so we had this on some fresh made buns, but toast, really, really good to have sloppy joes on. Now this recipe can be frozen. It just says to cool the mixture and then freeze it in freezer containers, and it can stay frozen for up to 4 months. It says thaw overnight in the fridge and then reheat just before serving. But I love this meal because, like I said before, it is one of my favorite meals. I put some French fries in the air fryer, and then we had those on the side, and then I just made a little bit of cooked carrots and green beans, and just was such a good meal. The next meal that we're going to make is a complete experiment for me. I found this recipe on Pinterest and it sounded really interesting. It is called an authentic New York City dirty water hot dog. Does not sound appetizing, but apparently these are supposed to taste like the hot dogs that you get at a street vendor in New York City. So I thought I would give it a try and see like how wrong can you go with the hot dog? And they actually did end up tasting pretty good. So what we're gonna do to get started is we're gonna take 1 large onion, and you just wanna peel it and just make really big slices of it. I just have my scrap bag there because I save all of my onion peels and everything to make stock with. It's a really good way to have like 0 waste. So once you get your onion chopped up, you're gonna take 32 ounces of a low sodium beef broth and then add it to your crock pot. You're gonna take 1/4 cup of ketchup. It just says preferred ketchup. I'm just using this Annie's Organic that I got from Azure. And then you're going to add 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, and then 1 teaspoon of ground cumin. 1 teaspoon of salt, it does suggest kosher salt, and then 1 tablespoon of sugar or preferred sweetener. So I just used a brown sugar in this. And then you're gonna add 3 tablespoons of a red wine vinegar. Next up, you're gonna add your cut onions to the mixture. After I added the onions in, I realized I'd actually forgotten a couple of ingredients. You wanna add 3 tablespoons of an oil of your choice. I just used an olive oil in this, and then some red pepper flakes. You can add however much you like, however the degree of heat that you like. Next up, you are going to cover this and cook this on high for 30 minutes. After the 30 minutes, you just wanna kind of stir it up a little bit and then add your hot dogs in. So I'm just using these hot dogs that I picked up from Aldi's. They're actually a pretty good price, and I think there is 4 or 5 per package. So I ended up making 2 packages in this because we wanted to have leftovers with that. So add your hot dogs, stir that in, and it says cover and cook for 60 minutes. It says the hot dogs will begin to split because they'll start to absorb the flavor from the broth and they'll increase in size. Once that happens, it says reduce the heat to low and then simmer. What you want to do is then use your tongs and take the hot dogs out of the mixture. If you would like to have the onions, you can definitely add the onions in with your hot dogs, but I just kind of left that broth in there. I also made some macaroni and cheese on the side with this, and then I love to have mayonnaise and corn relish on my hot dogs. It's so delicious. So I put some of my homemade mayonnaise on there and then some of my homemade corn relish. I think I actually did a video last summer showing you how I make this corn relish. If I can find the video, I'll leave it linked for you guys because this is one of my favorite condiments. I put this on almost everything. Burgers, sandwiches, hot dogs. It's so delicious, and I am making more this year. But if I can find that video, I'll link it for you guys. But this was actually a pretty good meal despite the disgusting name of it. For the next meal, we're gonna make a really good pork meal. It is a country fried pork with white gravy. I have left the recipe linked below for you guys in the video description, as well as any of the other recipes that I've used on this video that I have linkable or that I have like the actual ingredients to write down for you guys. So to make this recipe, I kind of tweaked it a little bit and I made my own version of pork schnitzel just to kind of have with it. So essentially what I'm doing with the country fried pork is I'm just making the white gravy from it with pork schnitzel. So delicious. I love this pork schnitzel recipe. So you want to tenderize your meat. You're going to use approximately 2 pounds of a boneless pork chop, and you just make sure you have some of the excess fat trimmed off, and then you're just going to tenderize them until they are very, very, very thin. Next up, in 3 different bowls, you're going to kind of make like an assembly line with these ingredients. So I say approximate when giving these measurements because I usually end up having to come in and add a little bit more of them because I run out during the process. So to get started, you're going to use 1/3 cup of an all-purpose flour, and then in there you're going to mix 1 tablespoon of garlic salt, and then you're going to add approximately 1 teaspoon of salt and garlic powder, and then half a teaspoon of paprika, and then half a teaspoon of black pepper, and then you're just going to stir that together. This, I ended up having to come in and add more flour and everything to it because it wasn't enough for the whole recipe. That's why I say these measurements are very approximate. Next up, you're gonna add 3 large eggs to your middle bowl, and you're just gonna beat those up. And then to the last bowl, you are gonna add 2 cups of a breadcrumb. Now it does suggest to use a panko breadcrumb, but I just use my homemade sourdough breadcrumbs. I just take leftover bread and just toast it up a little bit and then run it through my blender, and then I have breadcrumbs. It's a perfect way to not have bread go to waste. So you're gonna use approximately 2 cups of the breadcrumbs. Again, I had to come in and add more breadcrumbs to this. And the other thing I didn't show on camera is I like to lightly salt and pepper my breadcrumbs as well. So you can do that with that. Then you're gonna make an assembly line. You're gonna take your pork chop and you're gonna run it through the flour first. And then once it's coated on both sides with the flour mixture, run it through your egg mixture. Again, just make sure it's coated on both sides and then put it into your breadcrumbs. make sure that you have a nice coating of breadcrumbs on it. You don't want it too clumpy, just kind of shake off the excess just so that you don't have too much bread on there, and then set it aside. I like to get all of my schnitzel ready ahead of time. That way when it comes to frying, I'm not trying to multitask and do too many things at once. So get the assembly line, get them all breaded and ready to get fried up. I also have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. I find with schnitzel, even how thin I make it, I still am paranoid about it not being cooked inside after frying. So I like to just throw my schnitzel into the oven after I get a nice sear on both sides of it. So you're gonna add a healthy amount of oil into your frying pans. I'm just using some cast iron frying pans. I find when making schnitzel, cast iron is the way to go. And I'm also using an avocado oil just to fry them in. So what you wanna do is just have it on a pretty low heat, and you're just gonna kind of cook it on both sides of the pork chop. Now I noticed that this particular one, I had way too much breadcrumbs on it, and that's why I'm just spritzing it with a little bit of avocado oil there, just so that I can get a nice sear on the sides. So once they are cooked on both sides, I'm gonna take them and put them into a 9x13 casserole dish, and I'm just gonna put them into my oven. They were almost cooked through after the frying process, but again, paranoia, I just like to make sure that they're really cooked through. So I probably ended up cooking them, I would say, for an additional 15 more minutes. So while they are cooking in the oven, we are gonna get started on our white gravy. This stuff is so delicious and so easy to make. So to get started, you're gonna add 4 tablespoons of butter to a small skillet, and then whisk in 1/4 cup of flour. You wanna whisk that in until some of that raw flour smell comes off and it starts to smell nice and nutty. And then you're gonna slowly whisk in 2 cups of milk. I just used a whole milk in this, and it just tastes really, really good. You can definitely use a plant-based milk in this as well, and it works perfectly fine. Now we like a little bit of heat in our gravy, so I came in and added some cayenne pepper, and then you want to add some salt and pepper to taste. And then what you're going to do is just kind of stir that slowly. It usually takes, it says about 12 minutes to thicken. I found about 15 minutes and it was perfectly thick. It says whisk occasionally because you do not want to burn it. So once it gets nice and thick, you're just going to take it off the heat, and that's your gravy. Super easy to make. So I thought I would show you guys how I make my mashed potatoes. Everybody makes their mashed potatoes differently. This is kind of how we like them. So I just boil my potatoes. Once they're boiled, I drain them off, and then I add a little bit of either sour cream or creme fraiche to it. In this situation, I had creme fraiche, so I added that. And then salt, pepper, a little bit of milk, and then I just mash them until they're nice and smooth, and they taste delicious. Oh, the other thing I do add is butter as well. I like to add a healthy amount of butter in, usually about 2 tablespoons of butter in there. So here's our pork schnitzel. We had that with the mashed potatoes and some of my canned corn. You add the white gravy over top of it, and it's just amazing. It's kind of a combination of like Southern cooking with a little bit of German in there. It's just really, really good. For the next recipe, we're gonna make like a chicken cream cheese sandwich. I completely forgot where I got this recipe from, and I actually had to rewatch this video clip just to see what I added in because I totally lost the recipe. I got it on some social media. I don't know whether it was Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I can't remember where I found it, but it looked really good, so I thought I would try it. So I'm gonna try to give you guys the recipe as best as I can remember. So instead of chicken, I decided to use turkey because that's what we have available right now. I took a pretty big piece of boneless, skinless turkey breast. I think it was probably about 1.5 pounds. If you're using chicken, just use about 1.5 pounds of chicken breast. Make sure it's boneless, skinless, and then add them to a crock pot, and then you're just gonna season them with some salt and pepper. I think I used about a teaspoon of each, and then a teaspoon of some smoked paprika. You can use regular paprika if you have it, and then 2 tablespoons of a ranch seasoning. Now the recipe I remember it saying that it called for some onion and garlic. I just decided to use some granulated onion and granulated garlic. Just, it was quick and easy. And then you're gonna come in and add 1/3 cup of either chicken stock or turkey stock. I had turkey stock, so that's what I used. And then you're gonna cover that and cook it on low for approximately 6 hours, approximately. I came in and checked it a little bit beforehand and it was done. So next up, you're gonna shred your meat. So I use my beaters for this, and it works so perfect. You can use 2 forks if you want, but this I find is quick, easy way to shred meat. So I just shredded it up with my beaters. Once it got nice and shredded, I added a full 8-ounce package of some cream cheese to that. And then I honestly can't remember how much cheese I used in this. I used a Munster cheese, but you can use whatever cheese you have available. I think I ended up using probably about 2 cups of cheese in this, and it might have actually been a combination of cheddar cheese and Munster. So I still have my crock pot on low, and you just want to kind of get all of that cheese melted. Now I noticed that the cream cheese wasn't melting really quickly because it was straight out of the fridge. It does suggest to use room temperature. So I just came in and kind of stirred it all together just to get it incorporated. Now I believe the original poster said that he liked to have these on a bun, and it was kind of like a chicken sandwich, but I was not feeling having it on a bun, so I just made some white rice, put a little soy sauce on it, and then we had that with the rice, and it was really, really good. And then we had some asparagus from our garden here. So this was that night's meal, and it was delicious. For the last meal, we are gonna do one of my favorite go-to really quick meals. I think I've probably shown you guys this in one of my past videos, but it is on repeat because it's such a good quick meal to make. It is for a hash brown hamburger casserole. Now you don't necessarily need to use hamburger with this. You can use any type of meat that you would like. I just like the ground beef in this. So first off, what you want to do is take a 9x13 casserole dish and just get that nice and coated, either with cooking spray or just oil. And then you're also going to have your oven preheated to 375 degrees. Next up, you're going to take 1 pound of a ground beef, or again, like I said in the beginning, you can use any type of ground meat in this, and then you're gonna get that cooked through. In a large bowl, you're going to take 1 20-ounce package of hash browns, or approximately 3.5 cups of hash browns. These are just some hash browns that I actually made from scratch. I had some potatoes that were going bad, and I just made the hash browns and threw them in my freezer. I've left that video linked for you guys up above and in the video description if you want to check it out. It's so easy to make them, and it's a really good way to use potatoes that are kind of on the way out. So this recipe calls for 1 chopped onion, but because I don't use onions really in my cooking, I omitted it and just added some onion powder. You also want to come in and add 2 tablespoons of an all-purpose flour to this, or even a gluten-free flour you could probably use. And you're just going to mix that until that is all incorporated and you don't see any traces of the flour anymore. Then you're going to use 2 tablespoons of ketchup, 1 cup of a broth. I think I just used a chicken broth. I use whatever broth I have available, but the recipe does call for a beef broth. And then you're going to add 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. I definitely add more than that because I really think it adds a really good, rich flavor to it. So add as much as you like to add. And then salt and pepper to taste. Next up, it calls to add 2 cups of a frozen mixed vegetable. I don't use mixed vegetables only because Steven has very particular things that he does not like. He doesn't like peas and he doesn't like green beans. So what I ended up doing was just taking some frozen corn that was frozen rock solid and added that in, and then a can of my canned carrots and added those in. But if you have mixed vegetables, that would be so perfect in this recipe. Then you're gonna cook that all the way through, make sure everything's melted, and then you're gonna come in and put that into the 9x13 pan. With the hash browns, you are going to add about 1 cup of a shredded cheddar cheese in there and a 1/4 cup of melted butter. And you just want to stir that until that is all combined. Then you're going to take that hash brown mixture and just cover the top of the beef mixture with that hash brown. And you want to cook this for approximately 45 minutes or until the hash browns are nice and golden brown. Once you take it out of the oven, I just chose to top it with a little bit more cheese. It doesn't call for that in the recipe, but I just like to do more cheese whenever possible. Now, I know I said at the beginning that this was a quick, easy meal. It's easy to make. It's not necessarily quick because it does take 45 minutes to cook, but it is a very quick assembled meal. So that is going to be the last meal for this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope I give you a little inspiration for your upcoming week. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.